Hi everybody, welcome to the show. Today I've got a very special guest on the show. He is a colleague of mine and a friend. We've worked together in many places previously, many years ago, and he's somebody I truly call a mentor. Honestly, it's not just me. There are many people that I speak to who also know him from the teams that he led that say the same thing. So without further ado, let's meet my guest today, Rex Lester. Hello, Rex.
Hello, Mandy.
Thank you so much for joining. It's just so lovely that you came all this way. Well, you're not that far away, actually, are you? About,
no.
was it 40 minutes?
30, 40 minutes
Yeah.
drive. It's not too far.
That's really good. Yeah.
There we are.
So, are you good? You feel good? Ready for a little chat?
Interrogate away. I'm ready here, poised to answer all questions.
Oh, brilliant. Rex, you've come a long way in terms of your career journey. I remember working with you back in the day in one of the utility companies.
Yeah.
And we both were, well, actually, I don't know. You may have been doing project management. I was a business analyst or something like that.
It was a bit weird. It was a bit strange there.
Yeah, it was a bit of a strange setup. Lots going on. They were going through a huge transformation. But I met you then. You were leading a team. You also progressed to doing mobile deliveries. I just remember you were getting in there early on and learning all the sort of tricks and tips on, doing big releases on the App Store.
Yes.
And just, growing that kind of movement of Agile and Scrum and teaching others. And it was quite a journey, and you've just kind of gone forward in that way and helped other people, especially me. I've felt like you've helped me loads.
Okay.
I would like to know, because I asked this question for all of my guests, how did your early career journey begin? Because you know IT and business really well. How did it begin?
Well, I think it's sort of wrong to just sort of say at 16 or 18 you start work. I think a lot of that, of what I know, sort of happens quite a long way upstream when you're young, when you're a lot younger than you think. And while you're growing up, you're doing things and you're finding your way, and it's those things that perhaps establish a bit of a pattern. And it's actually, you'll see, it's one that I've come back to over a number of years. But when I was very young, I did all the sort of things that young boys do. I did a bit of railway spotting. I did a railway layout, and then I got very interested in. I bought an HF receiver, and there was a man up the road who was a radio ham, and so somehow I was introduced to him, and we used to chat, and he used to basically sort of mentored me a little bit about what amateur radio was and wasn't, and so on and so forth. And I joined the local club, and really that's how I got into electronics. And I learned a little bit of basic electronics as at that point, but not much. I wouldn't say I really knew it in a lot of detail, but I knew my way around a circuit board. I could draw a schematic and so on and so forth. So going to school, studying physics, I focused a lot more on electronics than I did on perhaps some of the other parts of the physics curriculum. And then by the time I was 16, I think I was learned enough. I think I'd had enough of school. and I think my father helped me, and I went and interviewed for a number of places. At that time, there were lots. This was in the late 70s. So I interviewed with Ultra Electronics, with the Post Office, I can't remember, 3 or 4 other companies, and several of them offered me roles, But the one that attracted me, and I don't know why, was the post office. So I joined the post office. Actually, as it was British Telecom. Actually, it was the telephone side of it,
Okay.
and did an apprenticeship, which went on for 3 years. And during that, I don't think that was really me doing that, but I got a grounding. It wasn't in electronics; it was more in telecommunications, in about telephones, poles, holes. We did it all, and I ended up at Heathrow Airport working on what are called PABXs. These are small telephone exchanges. They're all electromechanical back in the day. But I kept on my hobbies. And having worked there for a number of years, I had an opportunity. A friend of mine had gone out to the Middle East, and I had an opportunity to go with him, which I took. What was interesting was what attracted me to it was leaving where I was. And so I was almost threatened by my boss, because I think he said initially, "Oh yes, you can go," and then when he found out they'd made me an offer, he was suddenly less enthusiastic. So he sort of said, "If you go, you won't be coming back here." And I thought, and so off I went, and I worked out in the Sultanate of Oman for about it's a year and a half.
Okay.
Really, it's a very nice country.
How old would you have been then?
About 21, 22.
Yeah, so still fairly young, really.
Still fairly young. What then happened was I came back, and I looked around in British Telecom, and then I got a job for a company called British Telecom City Business Products, and they were doing the dealer boards. And they wanted someone to do electronic hardware. And I'd done a little bit of that when I was out in the Middle East, and also I had my experience from my hobbies and so on and so forth. I would say that I wasn't really that competent at that role, but I made the best of it that I could. And during that time, I found that I was drawn towards more the project management side of things than I was of the drawn to the how can you put it, the actual electronics.
Yeah,
I think everybody finds that if you make a career of your hobby, you've got to be a little bit careful. You might find that it's not as exciting as a career as it is as a hobby. When you're doing it for kicks, you can have a lot of fun, and you can really get into it, but you can put it down. But you can't put it down when it's a career, when it's your career, when it's something you would want to do.
Yeah.
So I was offered a job then at Ericsson, who were in the UK. They were down in Brighton, so we moved to Brighton. And I worked there for about 10 years. And I started in project management and then worked as a business analyst, but very much helping the organisation to organise things. And during that time there, I really got into sort of understanding processes. This is how things get done within an organisation. And you had the project management process, and this was the V model, the project management V model. Well, Ericsson had turned it into the U model, and they called it PROPS. And I can't remember what PROPS stood for, but some very nice people. And actually, this was at this time was really just before Agile was going, but project management was a big thing.
Yeah.
And when things didn't go wrong, it was always, you need to do more of it. You need to do it more strictly. More, it was that sort of approach to project management.
We'll get that, yeah.
But I got into all of this first as a project administrator. Then I worked in project management and started using some of the tools. So there was Timeline, which was one of these Gantt chart systems, and enjoyed all of that. But ultimately went much more into what I'd call business administration there. And I was working with a Swedish chap, and he put me forward, which was really, really, I would say, a very important part of my career, or time in my career, he put me forward and said, look, they're doing this MBA program at Brighton University. Would you like to do it? And I said, yes, I'd after thinking about it, I thought, yeah, but I'm a bit of a dropout at school, and
So already
I sort of already talked myself out of it. But I said, no, I'm going to do it. And so when I went on the course, there were 30 people from Ericsson, and then 30 other people who were from all over the place who were doing this. And what was interesting is Ericsson were funding it and giving me the time off, and they paid for some of the books and things that I needed, some of the materials. So was very generous. Anyway, after a year, it was a 3-year MBA. So after the first year, you had to complete a number of papers and all of this, and I filled all of these in, and I had a thoroughly good time. And they were using a system called action learning, and this was a system that was developed by a chap called I think it's Reg Reevens. I can't remember. You'd have to look him up. Mm-hmm. But basically, it was very much about the learning organisation. He talked about the future of businesses were going to be learning organisations. And so where he'd worked, and I think it was in the coal board or something back in the 70s, but where he'd worked, he said, he was saying, set up learning sets and have a mentor, and then discuss and set objectives for yourself. You can have a personal objective, but you can also have your business objectives for things you want to do in the projects. You can discuss things. And I've thoroughly enjoyed the approach, because we would be a group of, say, six people. We would meet regularly, and there was always set aside some time for you as a person, where you could ask questions, people could read, say, I'm proposing to do this as a project, and people say, yes, that's a good idea, Rex, but and so on and so forth. Anyway, that went through, and the only thing that really shocked me was at the end of the first year, about 13 of the people who started that MBA at Ericsson dropped out. Now, I stayed in with a number of people, but all the people who were paying and funding themselves just stayed at it. And when I talked to one of the people, he said, oh, yes, I got offered this last year and did it. And it's the same thing. They expect me to learn and read and do all this self-learning. And I said, in other words, he just wanted it to be, they just present the lectures, I write it down and spew it back to them verbatim. And that wasn't what this MBA was about. It was very much about learning, really learning. It was about someone talking about a subject, then going into that subject in a lot more detail yourself, perhaps reading around a little bit, proposing a project where you could show your understanding of that, and you might want to do something like, it could be a business project, or it could just be that you're going to do a literary review of that subject and write it up. It only had to be 5,000 words. It was nothing. So you'd do all of this, and then you would fill the module. Anyway, year one was very operational. Year two was functional. So you did things like finance and so on. And year three was when it became interesting, because a number of the people, we went in and we did business strategy, we did things like soft systems methodology and the viable systems model, and some of these more esoteric things. And there was suddenly a wall for people who had winged it. They knew business by instinct, if you know what I mean. And suddenly they were doing a subject that they had to learn. It wasn't something you could just say, oh, I learned, I just know that by instinct. None of us are sort of Alan Sugar or Trump or whatever by nature, or very few of us. Anyway, I just went into the subject matter in the way I always do, which is read a lot of stuff and so on and so forth. And at the end of it, I wrote in a paper and...
Fantastic.
But some people at that point got their first referrals. And I remember one, I think it was Chris, was quite shocked. He said it really was a real, punch to the stomach because you hadn't had that. But I mean, it's not the end of the world. It's just pick it up again and off you go. So they finished all of this. And then the last thing was you have to write a dissertation, and that was all done. So I've gone on about that a lot. But it was, I think, what was it? Somebody said when they finished it, I just want to read a novel and not a business book. Having 3 years of just having to read stuff, technical manuals and things about project management, and it was just nice to step away from that and just read a novel for leisure. And I thought, yes, that's what that MBA gives you. But no, what it gives you is a very good grounding in business and all the things that come together. So you go into a business and you talk to the head of finance. I'm the head of finance. Finance run the company. We're the important bits. And you go, oh, I'm the head of operations. Operations and projects, we run the company. We wouldn't exist if we weren't here, and so on and so forth. And of course, none of this is true. And this is what an MBA is about. It's teaching you that a business is a whole series of moving parts, and you don't have to be an expert in finance, but you do have to appreciate finance and have some sort of knowledge in it. You don't have to be an expert in operations, but if you think you're just going to run a company from perspective of being a financial engineer, it won't work. And this is what, to a certain extent, big companies, when you have someone at the top, they do appreciate all the parts. They don't just go, it's all about finance. And if they do, there's a problem. They understand the operationals. They see where the money's being made. And they also understand, if you're lucky, they understand strategy. And one thing I learned is strategy is important. And when I say that, strategy isn't just about we're going to be a $1 million turnover company by the end of the year. No. Strategy is about really understanding your capabilities, understanding what's going on in the market and what people are telling you, and then trying to come up with a plan, which is usually a compromise. In other words, what are you going to stop doing to achieve something in the future that you want to get to? In other words, you've got all these things. Sometimes you can't do all of it. You have to sort of focus your mind on doing those few things and leave it at that. And then there's all these techniques, so scenario planning and so on and so forth. You learn all of that. Anyway, having learned all of that and left, I think we came up to Y2K and I was still at Ericsson. And of course, you come out with a shiny MBA and think, oh, I'm Jack the Lad, and of course you're not. So
you think you're some big superstar.
so what happened was, obviously I was still back at Ericsson. I was just still Rex, and it didn't really matter. So I then moved on and I joined a consultancy, which was a tough learning experience, I think is the best description. What made it
tough, would you say?
What made it tough was, I think, being parachuted into different organisations and then having to practice project management or whatever I was doing. Now, normally, if you think about being a professional in something, you would be perhaps a professional in finance, or you're going to be a professional project manager, which is what I was being shoved into the organisation as, which is fine. You know your project management, and you know things like Gantt charts, you know earned value analysis, you know all these techniques and all these sort of things. But what you don't know is the organisation, and you don't know specifically at the time when you start some of the things, the culture, and so culture is definitely the way the way the organisations, it's more important than you imagine in an organisation. If you go and work for a bank, you realise that this culture of risk and risk aversion. You work in some of the companies, and there's this sort of culture of we think that working long hours is what really makes us successful, and you think you don't. So what I would say is, having gone into a lot of organisations, what you should always do when you join is have a look at what's going on. Right, try not to get too involved, but have a look at what's going on. Now, I use a sort of metaphor of buying a house next to a sewage farm. Oh, and I've used this a lot. So when you join an organisation, it's like moving into a house that's next to a sewage farm, and it stinks, and you realise it stinks, and you look and you realise there's a sewage farm next door. What can I do about it? So you keep the doors closed. But you know what? After 6 months, you don't notice it. But if someone else visits you, why are they holding their nose? And this is what culture is like in an organisation. It's a smell that unless you're new to a place, or you've come in and you wouldn't notice it. And what is important to do isn't so much to notice it, but to write it down. Yeah. Because when you then finish, say 6 months later, and you can't smell the smell, you remember, because you've written down what was actually very different. It's very easy to tune this sort of culture out, and instead of accept it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really, I mean, your Rexisms are actually brilliant, because they've helped me to.
They're infamous, aren't they?
They've helped me loads.
There we are.
Have a little
gulp
of that.
Cheers.
And I get the farm, sewage farm analogy. But, practically, that smell is still going to be there.
Yes, so it doesn't go away.
That's not going to go away.
You just stop smelling it.
So, the thing is, with a business, a business has an organisation. An organisation is built of people. And a business needs to thrive or, survive. It wants to thrive rather than survive. And the organisation is made up of people, and it's the people who help to build that culture. How much influence does a business actually have in terms of, that culture? Because if a business is thriving, then you'd imagine actually the organisation, the culture it may be
so culture is not just a smell, but it's the way we do business around here. It's the things we do, and that's it. And I won't repeat the whole 12 monkeys in a cage, with the banana at the top, and they hose them down.
Go on, just summarise it.
Well, it's 12 monkeys in a cage, and every time one of the monkeys goes up the rope to get a banana, they hose all the monkeys down. Right. All right. So they keep doing this, and eventually none of the monkeys move. Then they start to take the monkeys out of the cage and put new monkeys in. And if the new monkey goes up, they just pull it. All the monkeys pull him down, and eventually he gets used to it. Eventually, they've got a whole new set of monkeys in the cage. None of them have been hosed down. None of them will go for a banana. And that's culture. And sometimes it's very powerful, and it's there to protect the organisation. So what could possibly go wrong if we lend all these subprime people money, But, on the other hand, being a little bit risk averse in a banking organisation, not touching money, just let the counter agent do it. There's a lot of things there that protect, but it's the things that are now done unnecessarily that you have to challenge, and it's those things you have to weed out. Why are you still doing it? That's like, the world has moved on. Yeah, you're still stopping this lad from going up the pole to get the banana. there's no hose anymore. Why are we doing this? Let's go for the low-hanging fruit. There's no reason for it. So that's one of the sort of lessons you can learn from culture.
How can that change happen, though? Because this is a change, a shift. How can that happen? What sort of things help with change?
I think a lot of the time, it's driven from the top. But it's not so much driven from the top, but allowed from the top. So you have to get permission from perhaps somebody senior to say and say, I want to do it a different way, and explain why and for the reasons. And then they may just say, no, I just don't think I can take that risk or whatever. On the other hand, they might just say, knock yourself out. And of course, there's another issue here, which is even when people see something very successful happening, it just doesn't fit their mental model, their worldview, the Weltanschauung, or whatever they call it, the worldview. And so they just tune it out and they just say, that's not happening. And they go into some sort of form of denial. And this is why business change is so hard. Sometimes bringing in new people and changing people out is the only way.
Yeah.
When you implement Agile, there's sort of stages of doing it. So there's this demonstrating it, and there's and showing success in it or not, and then there's other bits of it. But the reality is, I always say that introducing change goes through phases, and with Agile, there's one phase I call revenge of the project managers, where they gang up and say, oh no, this isn't working. Let's get rid of all this stupid Agile and go back to project management. And it's a very dangerous period in an organisation, because they try to push it back. And if one of the things I'd say to people when that happens is, you sometimes you have to let it happen, because people then realise how much they hated it. They don't have to go back to it for long before they realise they hated it, and then they sort of say, right, let's go back to what at least we enjoyed doing Agile, and we got stuff done, even if it wasn't perfect, and nothing is perfect.
No, and I think it brings me to a question of, this, the organisation and the business, wants to thrive. The organisation is also having to, meet those expectations, and adopting change is something which, if you're set in a certain pattern and a way, and it could be fear, it could be, it could be that risk averseness, which stops people from changing and adopting. But what about this adopting some of the practices? Because those sorts of things can go a long way if you say, you know what, we do want to try and do a learning activity or an experiment and see what we can do with this experiment, and just put this amount of money towards that experiment and see if there's any future in doing
I don't think people actually maybe I'm too old and grizzly now to accept that, but I just don't think my anecdotal experience is that people don't care. They in the majority of people who have adopted Agile are very FOMO, fear of missing out. So we all jump on the Agile bandwagon. And don't worry about Agile now. We're all in on AI now. Yeah. Forget Agile. That was last year's FOMO. We're all in on AI, and that's therein lies the problem. And the other thing is, right, who cares, right? So if you're running a project and you say to your client, I'm running this project Agile, they go, yeah, fine. Or I'm running it Waterfall, fine. They don't care as long as it gets delivered.
Absolutely. No.
And so why would you care? And so you do have to sell it a little bit. You have to sell it on the idea that that project management doesn't always work. If you know exactly what you need to deliver, so if you're building a bridge, you know exactly what it's going to look like at the beginning of the project, and you go and deliver it. You just got to bring all the materials together and everything at the right time, and it gets fine. Whether people will tell you, we know exactly what we want. We know exactly what this software is going to do. We know exactly everything about it. The reality is, they don't. They don't, and that there is a selling point, but it's hard to sell because people will still say, "But I know what this is going to do. This project, I know it." And you're telling me now that I don't know what we're going to deliver, and that so you're doing more than just challenging them to take a risk. You're telling them they're wrong, which is and this is part of the culture.
My sort of definition is a different kind of AI when it comes to things like that. I think people in organisations who have that level of mindset, it's arrogance and ignorance. So they are, rather than being flexible and adopting a mindset of actually we don't know everything, and we know there are risks, and we know there are constraints, and we are making assumptions. So we have to look at all of these dependencies. Actually, let's bring some of these experts in who do know Agile, who do know some of the frameworks, whether it's Kanban or Scrum. Let's find out from them, how did they do it? How did they adopt these practices and deliver the first version of that app back in that time? How did they get these teams to collaborate? So I think there's arrogance and ignorance are qualities that should be looked at in a way that's not helpful.
I don't think arrogance. I think maybe ignorance, and also, and I don't blame people for being skeptical when someone says, "Here's an expert on something." So here's an Agile expert. You were doing it, and yet, we worked at BAE Systems, and I was doing an Agile program there, and I actually. And I've experienced this before, where someone had obviously read a lot in a book, and then was doing what they thought was Agile.
That's not an expert, though, is it? I mean,
no. That's the whole point. But when I went in as the expert myself, right? What are you going to do in this situation? And actually, all I could do, I wasn't going to challenge them. I wasn't going to argue with them. I actually waited for them to resign because they and that seems terrible. But in a lot of places, people are moving on, and sometimes it's just that's the old Chinese proverb: you don't need to go to war with people. You just need to wait quietly by the river and wait for their dead bodies to come floating by. And that in the past seems, why would that happen? And it happens. It happens more often than you imagine.
Yeah, and it's also, you've got to have your own peace of mind. You going in fighting is not very good for your health. I mean, I think more and more organisations and businesses, know about the level of mindset that people have. So, mental health is really important. So many people in all over the world are discovering actually their mental well-being is important. So, and organisations are recognising that as well. They don't want their workforce to be mentally unwell, because actually, where will that get them in serving the business?
I don't know. The number of organisations I've been in that talk about mental well-being, and then punish themselves, and another rexism or joke is IT. There are two types of people in IT, right? People trying to break people and broken people. That's it. There are people who are broke in everywhere I go. That's all I see. sort of lunatics trying to break people. Surely you can deliver this project faster, do it harder, do more, do this. And then a whole other bunch of people who are just broken by it. And they're very bright. Yeah. They're very bright and very clever, a lot of them, but they still do it.
How would you define success? If you had to define success, how would you define it?
How would I define the success? Ooh. Gosh, that's an interesting one. Nobody gets out of this world alive, but I think success is enjoying yourself. Mm-hmm. That's it. It's enjoying yourself and feeling valued. Yeah. It's, you could say money, but money is not that important. Once you get to a certain point, money becomes not as important. If I went into an organisation, and I felt that I'd really contributed, and that people were happier themselves, then I'd measure that as a success. And I think that happened at British Gas. The team that I worked with actually enjoyed themselves as much as they got on, and they worked very hard and had to do a lot. And we made mistakes, and we blamed each other, which is fine. But that didn't really matter. In the long term, we had a lot of fun together. We enjoyed ourselves. We worked hard, and we produced a nice product. And the outcome was a product that the customer liked.
There was a lot of camaraderie there, and
yes,
you had a lot of skilled people as well, from the engineers, the developers, testers, to even business analysts were in your team.
But a lot of it was coaching people. So I had some very clever people, especially the developers and the testers, very clever people, and very dedicated. And what was important for them, or what was important for me, wasn't so much that they were all experts or super duper, that they all made allowances for each other. So we had this lad who was a tester, and so you've tested this? Yes. Well, not yet, but there was always this conversation with him. And we got to the end of this very long project where we had a delivery, and it was like, well, we got all the way here, and we just got this mile up Mount Everest now, and we're done. And so we went away on a Friday, thinking, oh God, we've got to test the whole thing. Oh, we came back on Monday. Right, where do we start? And this tester said, I came in all weekend, it's done. It's done the whole lot. And everybody went, oh, thank goodness. Yeah. And of course, he was a bit flaky at times in places, but when he knew, as a team player, he knew when he needed to step up, and he stepped up at just the right moment for all of us. And the same with some of the other test people. They were building upstream, but they knew they had to get this done because it had to be got through to get to the next stage, and they weren't working on it because they wanted to work or the money. They were working because they were a part of a team, part of something slightly bigger than themselves, and enjoying it as well.
I think, from what I can remember, we've worked in teams and organisations with a huge, mix of skilled people from different backgrounds, and now there's a big kind of emphasis on neurodivergent or neurotypical type of people. Okay. What I've noticed from when we were in organisations, we didn't really identify those sorts of things. We knew people were introverts or extroverts. But what I can remember is people like yourself creating psychological safety within a team. And I think that, like your tester coming in, working for the whole weekend, you sort of do these things. I remember when we used to do releases in a consultancy and we'd work all night. We would just go into the office. We knew we had to do this release and there was a lot of work to do and we were going to have to pull an all-nighter. And obviously that's not good, but sometimes these things have to happen. And if you've got people who are of the mindset, actually, I want to make this a success, then, it's good to have different kinds of people. How would you say this psychological safety how can people build more of that? But not put burdens on people. But
I don't think you can. I've run projects where there's psychological unsafety is probably, like people would probably say, what a disaster.
So do you think they're driven by
and I've run projects where people have worked 2 nights straight and burned out and being completely broken and
not good for you.
And you must learn from it. That's all I'd say is you say it's not good, it's good. It's like everything. If you fall over, it doesn't matter as long as you pick up something when you're down there. Pick up something and psychological safety is important. It's one of those things, but it's not something you can just ask for, rather like leadership. You can't just demand it. It's something you have to build, and it's a two-way stream as well, in that if you've got people who have an agenda, it's not going to work. Sometimes people have to accept or set aside that neurodiversity and all of this. I mean, that's a bit modern for me. I mean, when I was back in my MBA, we did Belbin.
Yeah.
So we did Belbin team skills. Remember there were 7 things, shapers and all this sort of stuff.
Yeah, there were.
And you could you try to spot all these people you had in your team to make sure you had a finisher, a completer, and all of these sort of things. But there wasn't. Maybe that's become a bit more commercial, but that was it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So. If you had a billboard for future professionals, what would it say?
For future professionals?
Yeah.
Ooh. First of all, if you're going to pursue a career, be aware that it's not going to be a straight line. You'll probably end up doing something very different from what you imagined you would start doing. I started doing ham radio electronics, and it led on to this. And sometimes I would say, number 2, pursue opportunities as they arrive. Don't say I'm not one of these, or I'm not one of those. If the door is opened, go through it, try it.
Yeah.
If it's shut, don't bash your head on it. Don't try pushing yourself down a career path if doors are closing on you. You may find that, say you wanted to be a project manager, you may find that suddenly it's all done by AI. You might want to do Agile and it all suddenly becomes AI and it's not there. Don't push on it. Look for something else. Go another direction. Don't push yourself. As I said, and look for things that you enjoy.
Yeah.
I mean, if you enjoy learning, go into roles where you are learning. And that's again back to that MBA and that learning sets and the learning organisation taught me. When an opportunity comes along. That's change, and change is scary. Change means you have to learn something new, and it's fear of the unknown, and it can be very uncomfortable at the beginning, but once you get into it, so that's perhaps the third point, right? Don't be afraid to go into something, but give it some time. It may take you a year, it might take you 6 months. And it could be very painful. You're going into a new organisation, say, where you're doing this and you haven't done something before. You're having to learn it. You're having to learn the culture. You're having to learn the people and the organisation, how it's structured, the processes. So there's a lot to take on at the beginning. Yeah. But it's if it's something you're interested in and you're enjoying it, push through. And but on the other hand, if you're on the ski lift and you fall over, don't hold on to it. just let go, ski round and try again. All the people at the bottom are going, let go, just let go. If something's not working, you don't have to do it. You can just stop.
Yeah.
And it's perfectly acceptable.
Absolutely.
I'm not judging you. Nobody's judging anybody.
Absolutely. Just let it go. Don't hold on to it.
Don't hold on to it.
Rex, thank you so much for coming onto the show. What are you doing? What's next for you? How can people get hold of you? I'll put your details on the podcast link.
Yeah, I mean,
LinkedIn.
I'm on LinkedIn. Really, I've sort of gone into semi-retirement in that I got to a point where I was contracting and things dried up. That I was really working outside of IR35 and things in that rate dried up. So I ran the company down, looked into things financially and sorted out all my pensions, and so really in the last 2 or 3 years I've focused very much more on investment, so making money in returns from investment, making sure that my pensions are all in the right place, and learning a lot about things like annuities, sequencing risk. There's a whole lot of stuff around finance that although I'd set up aside enough money in pensions to give myself quite a comfortable lifestyle, you still need to pay attention to things like, do you want to take all this money and invest it and then live off that investment? Or do you want to just buy an annuity, which means that they'll pay you a fixed amount every month and there's no risk, right? Well, there is a risk. The risk is obviously inflation, but and then also the money that's invested now, if you're coming towards your retirement, do you want to put that into cash or into bonds at this point while you're working your last few years of your pension? So I was learning all of these sort of things.
Yeah.
And also looking at the sort of global financial macroeconomics and what's going on. That's been very interesting to me. I'm of the opinion now that we're heading towards a bit of a monetary reset. So financially, you want to perhaps think in terms of holding on to investments that are commodities, so physical things, so gold, silver, but also shares in companies, because if there is a reset, what will happen is they'll redo money. They'll introduce perhaps a central bank digital currency, and it will be one new pound is worth 100 old pounds, and they'll revalue it, of course, and you'll get paid more and so on. But if you're holding loads and loads of money, like what I call physical money in the bank, you might find you get burnt, if you know what I mean. It was JP Morgan who said, gold is money, everything else is credit. And he's right. In other words, when they made money they had gold, and then they said, this dollar, $22 is an ounce. Well, now it's $4,400 is an ounce. So that tells you something about that paper that they keep printing, that it's not actually worth. And of course, they need to pay the interest on this.
Yeah.
And of course, they're now running out of road fast. So what happens when that happens? And that may happen tomorrow. It may happen this year. It may happen next year. But it's worth thinking about those sort of things financially.
Yeah.
For your well-being.
Yeah.
Although it does, I don't lose sleep about it for some reason.
That's good, Rex. It's really good that you're not losing any sleep, and it's good to see you looking well. And thank you so much for coming on to the show. Well, that's it, folks. I hope you enjoyed our lovely little conversation, our natter, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you.